The 2-day hike to Ethelberg Lookout nearly broke me. By the time I crested the final ridge and saw the steel tower piercing the sky, my legs were trembling with exhaustion. A biting wind whipped across the bare mountaintop, making the structure's metal joints creak like old arthritic knuckles. Despite the pain radiating through my body, I felt a huge surge of accomplishment. Not many people could handle this assignment, which was exactly why I'd asked for it. Just a lookout job, my ex had sneered, sitting alone staring at trees. She hadn't understood that Ethelberg was different, the most isolated post in the northern Rockies, the career maker, the tower breaker. I trudged the final 100 yards, each step a fight against gravity. The tower's ladder-like stairs stretched upward, another 50 feet of vertical hell before I could rest. I paused at the base, catching my breath and admiring the huge view surrounding me. Mountains stretched to the horizon in wild, rocky waves, an ocean of stone frozen in time. The climb nearly finished what the hike had started, but finally I hauled myself through the trapdoor and into my home for the next 4 months. The radio crackled almost immediately. "Ethelberg, this is dispatch. Do you copy? Over." I grabbed the handset. "This is Ethelberg. Ryan reporting in. Over." "Welcome to the top of the world, Jaden." Frank's voice carried the worn-out sound of a guy who'd clocked 30 years in the Forest Service. "How's the tower looking?" I looked around the small room, measuring about 14 feet by 14 feet. Sunlight poured through windows on all sides, showing a space that looked like the last guy had bugged out halfway through dinner. Dirty dishes crusted over with some mystery muck. Maps spread out everywhere across the floor. The narrow bed a mess, blankets twisted into something like a rope. "It's a mess," I said, frowning. "What happened to Cole?" A pause stretched over the radio. "David had some difficulties. He left before his replacement arrived." "Unprofessional," I muttered. "Get settled in. We'll check in tomorrow for your first official report." After signing off, I got to work cleaning. The last lookout's messy habits annoyed me, but I'd expected problems. That's why they paid the Ethelberg position more than any other lookout job around. With the worst of it cleaned up, I finally let myself soak in the view. The afternoon sun sent long shadows stretching across all that wilderness, making the distance between peaks seem endless and close at the same time. I turned slowly, taking it all in, matching landmarks with the maps. When I got to the western horizon, something flickered at the very edge of my sight. A slight shiver where nothing should be moving at all. I blinked, staring hard at the distant mountains. Nothing. Just rock sentinels standing watch forever, exactly like they had for thousands of years. I rubbed my eyes. High altitude, exhaustion, and not enough water. That combination could mess with anyone. As darkness fell, I unpacked my supplies into the small cabinets and drawers. The footlocker tucked under the bed was the only place left. I dragged it open, expecting it to be empty, but found a leather-bound journal jammed tight against one panel. Its cover was worn smooth from being handled, the pages puffed up from damp air. Opening it showed page after page of frantic, obsessive sketches of the horizon, the same mountain range I'd been seeing all afternoon, drawn over and over with crazy, exact detail. Some pages showed tiny differences in how the peaks lined up. Others had the same view repeated multiple times on one page, like the artist was desperate to catch something that wouldn't stay still. Scrawled in the margins, just one phrase over and over: "It moves when you look away." I snapped the journal shut, suddenly aware of the darkness pressing hard against the windows and the vast, quiet wilderness staring back at me from every direction. Sleep came in fits and starts that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those jagged mountains, and that phrase kept echoing in my mind. It moves when you look away. Eventually, I stuffed the journal under the cot and forced myself to think about practical matters. Equipment checks, supply inventory, radio procedures. The routine of the job finally steadied me enough for exhaustion to pull me under. Morning arrived with startling sharpness. I'd never seen a sky so blue, so vast, or mountains standing out so sharply. Not a single cloud spoiled the horizon. Perfect fire spotting conditions. While sipping instant coffee, curiosity got the better of me. I dug out David's journal from under the cot and started flipping through it more carefully. The early parts were normal enough. Weather notes, wildlife spotted, the occasional complaint about rations or being lonely, standard lookout gripes. Then, about 3 weeks into David's post, the tone turned strange. The Black Ridge peaks looked different today. Thought my eyes were playing tricks, but I've been staring at that skyline for 23 days straight. I know what it's supposed to look like. A few pages later, something's wrong with the horizon. It's breathing. Not quickly. One breath might take hours, but it's there. The valleys swell and shrink. The peaks rise and fall. And later still, it sees me. God help me, I know it sounds crazy, but when I watch it, it watches back. I can feel it. I closed the journal with a snort. Classic isolation psychosis. Training covered it. How the human mind, starved for company and stuck in a boring place, can invent things to keep itself busy. Hallucinations, paranoia, the whole package. Sorry, David, I muttered, setting the book down. But I'm made of tougher stuff. I grabbed the binoculars and stepped onto the catwalk. The morning air nipped at my face as I methodically began my first official sweep. Section by section, scanning the wilderness, noting landmarks, scanning for smoke, learning my territory. When I reached the distant Black Ridge Range David mentioned, I paused. Something seemed off. I lowered the binoculars, rubbed my eyes, and looked again. 2 big peaks. I'd already nicknamed them the Twins yesterday. Didn't look matched anymore. Where they stood side by side before, there was now a definite gap between them, a valley splitting what should have been solid ridge. That's not right, I whispered. I lowered the binoculars and squinted at the blurry, distant horizon. The gap was still there, clear as day. A sudden wave of dizziness slammed into me. The floor seemed to tip under my feet and my stomach heaved violently. I stumbled back inside, barely making it to the sink before throwing up the coffee. Cold sweat broke out on my forehead as the little cabin seemed to spin around me. When the spinning eased, I splashed water on my face and took several deep breaths. Altitude sickness, I told myself. Or maybe the brutal hike, lousy sleep, and coffee on an empty stomach. Logical explanations made sense. I avoided the windows for the next hour, throwing myself into organizing gear and reviewing procedure manuals. But the mountains pulled at me. I had to check again. This time I sat down before raising the binoculars. The Black Ridge Range snapped into focus. The gap between the Twins was still there, maybe even wider now. But worse, the peak on the left, which had been a neat pyramid shape yesterday, now leaned visibly to one side like a crooked tooth. Atmospheric distortion, I said out loud, my voice strangely loud in the quiet. Temperature layers bend the light. Basic physics. But as the words left my mouth, David's came crowding back. It moves when you look away. I forced myself to lower the binoculars and stared at my hands. They were shaking. Don't be an idiot, I told myself firmly. Mountains don't move. My eyes flicked back to the journal on the table. Its worn leather cover suddenly looked menacing. David had written about these changes for weeks before vanishing, before cracking. What really happened to David Cole? The radio crackled to life, making me jump. Ethelberg, lookout, this is dispatch. Daily check-in, over. I grabbed the handset, hugely relieved to hear another human voice. Dispatch, this is Ethelberg, reading you loud and clear. How's your first morning treating you, Jaden? I opened my mouth to describe what I'd seen, but the words caught in my throat. How would it sound? Hey, Frank. Think the mountains rearranged themselves last night? He'd have a chopper up here by sunset, not to rescue me, but to evaluate my sanity. Everything's fine, I lied, just getting settled in. As I signed off, my eyes wandered back to the western windows and the Black Ridge Range beyond it. A deep instinct told me to look away, to keep my eyes off it. But I couldn't, I had to know. I had to. I needed to know. That need ate away at me in the days that followed. I decided to document everything. David's madness seemed less crazy now, almost planned out. I grabbed my phone and took a photo of the Black Ridge Range, making sure to get the twins and that weird gap between them clearly in frame. Every 3 hours I took another picture. If it was all in my head, the photos would show the same mountain face, unchanged each time. They didn't. By sunset, the gap had clearly gotten wider, not a huge jump, but enough that when I held the morning photo next to the dusk one, the difference was obvious. I tried to blame it on changing light as the sun moved, shadows playing tricks, but light doesn't move mountains. I found myself opening David's journal again, turning pages full of his frantic drawings. What I first thought were the twisted visions of a man losing his mind now looked like careful notes. His sketches showed a pattern, small changes at the start, getting bigger and weirder later on. I ran my finger under the words by one drawing. Day 37. They're more deliberate now, not just shifting, arranging themselves. Sleep was something I couldn't get anymore. Every few hours I'd wake up gasping, forced to look at the horizon. Each time something was different. A sharp ridge had gone smoother. A tall peak was suddenly shorter, like something huge pressed it down. On day 3, I made a rough timeline. I taped the photos I'd printed from my phone beside pages torn from David's journal. The matches were too strong. The changes I saw were just like he'd drawn. This is impossible, I whispered to the empty room. Mountains don't move. But they did, and it was getting faster. I called Frank that morning, fighting to keep my voice level. How's our rookie holding up? He asked, sounding cheerful. Fine, I lied. Just wondering, has the Forest Service ever done any kind of geological checks on the Black Ridge Range? Geological work? That's not our problem. Why? Oh, nothing much. The shapes out there, they grab the eye. That's just mountains, Jaden, Frank laughed. Been sitting before us, will be sitting long after we're dust. I wasn't so sure anymore. That afternoon, I saw something that tore apart every last bit of doubt. I was scanning the horizon through my binoculars, forcing myself to check the new shifts, when the whole Black Ridge Range seemed to ripple like water after you throw a rock in. Then, almost as if it felt me watching, the center part of the range started to move. Peaks dropped, valleys bulged up. The outline against the sky changed into a shape that froze my blood. A smile. A massive, jagged, mountain-sized smile. It hung there for maybe 20 seconds before the rocks slumped back into a more normal look, though not like they were before. A wave of dizziness hit me like a punch. I went down hard on my knees, throwing up violently, black spots swimming in front of my eyes. When the sickness eased, I crawled on my hands and knees to the east side of the tower, putting as much space as I could between me and that awful window view. My hands shook as I dug through David's journal, hunting for some clue, anything that could explain what just happened. Near the back, I found a page where the writing changed. It got steadier, like he forced his hand to write clearly through the terror. It took me too long to figure it out. Looking isn't just watching, it's connecting. Every time I watch, I open a path. It sees me seeing it. The longer I watch, the more it learns. And it's learning me, learning how to reach me. The mountains aren't moving when I look away. They're moving because I look at all. Don't let it know you see. Looking is an invitation. It learns you. My phone chirped, the alarm I'd set to take another picture. My stomach turned at the thought of looking again, of linking with whatever thing was out there. But I stood up anyway, pulled towards the west windows by something stronger than fear. The Black Ridge Range waited, its new shape, feeling expectant. And even though every cell screamed at me to turn away, I lifted my phone and snapped another shot. Right then, I understood perfectly. I wasn't tracking the mountain's changes anymore. It was tracking me. I spent the next day avoiding windows. I pulled down the faded green blinds on the western side of the tower and tried to convince myself that if I couldn't see the mountains, they couldn't see me. But logic nagged at me. How could a mountain range see anything? Even as I thought that, I knew I'd passed the point where regular reasoning applied. Every few hours, I'd feel this pull toward the windows, like someone was yanking a string inside my chest. My job was to watch for fires, after all. That's what I told myself as I peeked between the blinds, my heart hammering. Each time the Black Ridge had shifted again, subtle changes you wouldn't notice unless you were looking for them. But I was looking, and I knew it knew. Sleep was impossible. When I shut my eyes, I saw that mountainous smile, teeth of jagged stone waiting to swallow me whole. I'd jerk awake, gasping, certain something was pushing against the tower, trying to get in. The steel frame groaned and creaked in the wind, sounds that were just annoying when I arrived but now felt like threats. By the third morning after seeing the smile, I knew I had to get out. To hell with the seasonal contract. This was about staying alive. I grabbed the radio, my only link to the outside. "Dispatch, this is Ethelberg Lookout. Come in, Frank. Over." My voice sounded strange, higher than usual. Static answered, a flat, dead hiss. "Dispatch, this is Ethelberg. I'm requesting immediate evacuation. Medical emergency. Over." The static changed, pulsing now. 3 short bursts, 3 long ones, 3 short again. Not Morse code, something else, not right. I tried again, practically yelling into the mic, but that pulsing static just got louder, drowning my voice out. I slammed the radio down. Had the mountains blocked the signal? Could they even do that? It sounded crazy, but no crazier than mountains that moved, that smiled, that watched me. My sanctuary now felt like an observation platform, a place designed not for me to watch the wilderness, but for the wilderness to watch me. 14 by 14 feet had never felt so small, yet so wide open. I was a bug in a jar, something's prize. I grabbed David's journal again, desperate for anything to understand. Flipping frantically, I found something I'd missed, a slight bulge in the back cover. Prying it open, I found a hidden pocket sewn into the leather binding. Inside was a folded piece of fresh white paper, stark against the journal's yellowed pages. My hands shook as I unfolded it. It wasn't scribbled like the journal. This note was written with careful, cold precision. It watches the watchers. The tower is a trap. Looking invites it in. The only escape is to stop being a watcher and become unseen. I'm going to climb down and walk toward it. If you're reading this, I failed, or maybe I succeeded in a way I can't understand. The choice is yours now. I dropped the note like it was hot. David walked toward it, the same thing driving me mad. But a horrible kind of sense started to click. The tower made me obvious, put me on display. What if the only way to break free was to do the opposite of a lookout's job? Not watch from afar, but go toward it. I slid down with my back on the wall, farthest from the window, sitting on the floor. Leaving scared me senseless, but staying meant losing my mind, or something worse. David made his choice. Soon, I'd have to make mine. Huddled there, frozen on the cold floor, I noticed something that turned my blood to ice. The pulsing static from the radio was still there, a low thrumming. But now, another sound underneath it. The faint rhythmic creak of the tower's metal bones. They were in perfect time with the static, beat for beat, like a heartbeat. And a sudden horrifying understanding slammed into me. It wasn't just watching anymore. It was coming for me. The synchronized pulse of the radio static and the tower's creaking grew louder, more insistent. I pressed my hands against my ears, but it did nothing to muffle the sound. It was inside me now, resonating through my bones, my teeth, my skull. I stumbled to the window, desperate for some kind of escape plan. That's when I saw it. The fog. It wasn't the normal morning mist that sometimes clung to the valleys. This was different, unnatural. Thick, opaque white clouds rolled across the landscape with deliberate purpose, swallowing trees, rocks, and eventually the base of my tower. The fog climbed higher, consuming the structure floor by floor. I watched, paralyzed, as it rose toward me like a predator, stalking its prey. Within minutes, the windows revealed nothing but an impenetrable white void. The silence that followed was worse than the synchronized pulse, a vacuum of sound pressed against my eardrums until they ached. Then, a new sound emerged, a low, deep hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The steel beams of the tower vibrated in response like a tuning fork, resonating with some cosmic frequency. My head felt like it would split open. The vertigo hit me with such force that I collapsed to the floor. The room tilted and swayed around me, the walls breathing in and out like lungs. I clutched David's journal to my chest, understanding now why his writing had grown increasingly frantic and messy. This wasn't madness, it was awful clarity. I knew then that I couldn't stay. The tower wasn't a sanctuary. It was an observation platform, a place designed to make me visible to whatever lurked beyond the horizon. David had understood this. His note said the only way to escape was to stop being a watcher and become unseen. With trembling legs, I forced myself to stand. Each step toward the staircase was agony as the floor seemed to ripple beneath my feet. The hum grew louder as I began my descent, the metal steps vibrating against my palms as I clutched the railing. I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead as I emerged at the base of the tower. The fog pressed in from all sides, thick and choking. I had no compass, no trail markers, no way to tell direction. All I knew was that I needed to move away from the tower. I walked for what felt like hours, the journal still clutched in my hand. My only companion in this white void. Gradually, the hum began to fade, and the fog thinned. Hope flickered in my chest. Maybe David had been right. Maybe this was escape. Then the fog cleared entirely, and that hope died. I stood on a barren, rocky plain that stretched in all directions. No trees, no underbrush, none of the lush forest that had surrounded the tower, and no tower behind me. It was gone as if it had never existed. Before me, filling my entire field of vision, loomed the Black Ridge Range. Impossibly close now, its jagged peaks reached toward the sky like grasping fingers. The mountains that had seemed so distant from my lookout were now a wall before me, massive and undeniable. As I stared, unable to look away, the rock face before me began to shift. Cracks appeared, widening into a jagged line. The mountains were moving again, but this time with purpose, with intent. The line curved upward at both ends, forming that now familiar shape. A smile, a mountain-sized, jagged smile, and deep within that stony mouth I saw it, a faint, flickering light, like a lantern in a distant window, or a lookout tower perched on some impossible cliff within the mountain itself. I stepped forward, drawn by a terrible curiosity. In that moment, I understood. David hadn't escaped. He had simply found his new post. The journal slipped from my fingers as I began walking toward the light. My new destination, my new purpose. The watcher had become the watched, and now I would watch others from within the mountain's jaws, continuing the cycle that had claimed me. The mountain was hungry for observers, and I had volunteered.